It was almost evening when the single father pushed the door of the small grocery store. His back hurt, his shoulders were tired, and his legs just wanted to sit down. But he had to pick up a few things: milk, bread, and a little snack for his son, who was quietly walking beside him. The boy held his father's hand and looked up at him, smiling. They didn't speak much. Both were tired. The father had been working long hours lately. His job at the workshop paid just enough, and every day felt like a climb. After work, he would rush to pick up his son from school, help him with homework, cook dinner, clean up, and then get ready to do it all over again the next day. But he never complained. He just wanted to make sure his boy never felt the pain. He did. They walked through the narrow aisles of the store. The father picked what they needed with care. He looked at prices twice. Sometimes he'd pick something up and quietly put it back when his son wasn't looking. He was doing his best to give his child a good life, even if that meant giving up small comforts. When they reached the counter, the cashier was already waiting. She was young, maybe in her early 20s. Her uniform was clean, but her eyes looked heavy. There were dark circles under them, and her face looked tired. Even though she wore a light smile as she started scanning the items, the father noticed something odd. She kept glancing at the clock hanging behind her. Not just once, but every few seconds. It wasn't the normal kind of glance. It looked like she was counting every single minute. She scanned the milk, looked up at the clock, scanned the bread, looked again. The father watched her quietly. She didn't seem impatient or rude, but something was clearly bothering her. Her eyes weren't just looking, they were hoping. Almost as if the clock would magically speed up and rescue her from something. The little boy tugged at his father's sleeve and whispered, "Dad, she keeps looking at the clock." The father nodded. He had noticed too. At first he thought maybe she was just tired or bored. Maybe her shift was almost over and she couldn't wait to go home. But there was something different about the way she kept looking, like every minute mattered in a way that was personal, maybe painful. When she handed him the receipt, the father spoke. He didn't want to sound rude or nosy, but something told him to ask. His voice was gentle. "Can I ask something?" he said. She looked up, a bit surprised, and said, "Yes, sir." He paused. "I noticed you've been staring at the clock. Is everything okay?" For a second, the cashier didn't respond. Her smile faded. Her lips trembled slightly. She looked away from him and back at the clock. It was as if his question had unlocked something she had tried to hide all day. She blinked quickly and took a deep breath. Her voice came out soft, almost like a whisper. "My shift ends in 7 minutes, she said. "And if I don't leave right away, I'll miss the visiting hours at the hospital." The father felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He hadn't expected that. He didn't know what to say. He just stood there, holding the grocery bag, listening. The cashier looked down, playing with the corner of the receipt in her hand. "My little brother, he's in the ICU, she continued. "He got hit by a car last week. He hasn't woken up yet. And I'm all he has." Her eyes were shiny now. She wasn't crying, but she was close. Still, her voice was steady. "I work both shifts to cover the bills, morning and evening. But the only time I can see him is between 7 o'clock and 7:30. And it takes me 20 minutes to get to the hospital." The store was quiet. The father felt his own eyes sting. He looked down at his son, who had gone quiet too, sensing the weight of the moment. Now he understood why she kept looking at the clock, not because she was waiting for freedom, but because she was racing against it. Every minute mattered. Every second gone was a second lost with someone she loved. The father didn't say much. He just gave a slow nod. The cashier forced a small smile and said, "Thank you for asking. Most people don't." He looked at her one more time before walking out. His son looked up at him and asked softly, "Is your brother going to be okay?" The father didn't answer right away. He just squeezed his son's hand a little tighter. Outside the store, the streetlights had come on. The world looked the same, but something had shifted in the father's heart. He had walked in thinking about milk and bread, but walked out thinking about time, love, and the strangers carrying silent battles every day. Asterisk, the single dad walked out of the store with his little boy by his side. The grocery bag was light, but his heart felt heavy. He couldn't stop thinking about the cashier's words. Her voice still echoed in his mind, soft, tired, full of quiet pain. My shift ends in 7 minutes, and I have to reach the hospital before visiting hours end. He kept seeing her eyes, the way she looked at the clock, not for freedom, not to escape work, but to reach someone who might not have much time left. He couldn't shake it off. As they walked toward their car, the boy asked again, "Daddy, is her brother very sick?" The father nodded slowly, helping him into the car seat. "Yes, son, he is." "Is she alone?" The father didn't answer. Right away, he started the car and looked out the window. He was thinking about how many people out there were fighting silent battles like her. She was working long hours trying to be strong, carrying all the weight by herself and still showing up with a small smile. As they drove home, the boy stayed quiet, which was unusual. He usually asked about dinosaurs or school stuff. But tonight, he seemed deep in thought, just like his dad. At home, the father made dinner while his son sat at the table coloring. The usual cartoons played in the background, but nobody was really watching. When they sat down to eat, the boy said, "Daddy, we have more food than we need, right?" The dad looked at his plate and then at his son. "We have enough," he replied gently. "Maybe we can share," the boy said, with innocent eyes. "Like how you said we should always help when we can." The father smiled, touched by his son's heart. Kids learn by watching, and in that moment, he knew his son had seen something important that night: kindness, care, and quiet courage. Later that evening, after putting his son to bed, the father sat on the couch. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp. He wasn't watching TV or reading. He was just thinking, that girl, she must be running right now to the hospital, he thought, tired, hurting, hoping her brother is still hanging on. He remembered her, hands slightly shaking when she handed him the receipt. Her fingers were rough, not from age but from work, and her voice soft like someone used to being ignored, but still trying. That moment stayed with him. It was just a short conversation, but it felt big. Bigger than the groceries. Bigger than the day. The next morning, the dad couldn't focus much at work. He kept wondering if she had made it to the hospital on time. Did she see her brother? Was he doing any better? No one at the store would know him, and it wasn't his place to ask too much. But something inside him felt unsettled. By the end of his shift, he made a decision. After picking up his son from school, he told him they were going back to that same store. "Why, Dad?" "We already bought milk yesterday," the boy said, puzzled. I want to check on someone," the dad replied. They drove to the store again. The same soft bell rang as they walked in. The shelves were stacked, the same music played overhead. But the cashier was not there. A different young man stood behind the counter. He smiled and greeted them. The father politely asked, "Is the girl who was working here last night not in today?" The young man shook his head. "She's working the late shift again. Starts in an hour." The dad thanked him and walked out, but he didn't feel disappointed. He just felt more sure. He looked at the clock on the store wall before leaving. 6:03 p.m. Back in the car, he turned to his son and said, "Want to go grab a snack before coming back?" The boy beamed, "Yes." They went to a small bakery nearby, grabbed 2 warm pastries, and waited. The clock ticked, and when it hit 6:55, they returned to the store. She was there. Same tired eyes, same clock. But her face lit up just a little when she saw the dad and his son again. "Back already?" she asked kindly. The father smiled. "Yeah, but I came to say something." She looked confused but curious. "You said yesterday that it takes you 20 minutes to reach the hospital, right?" She nodded slowly. He handed her a small folded note with a few bills inside. "Go now. Leave a bit early today." She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the note. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "It's not charity," he said. "It's a gift from one person who knows pain to another." Tears filled her eyes, but this time, she didn't try to hide them. She glanced at the clock again, this time not in fear, but with hope. The young cashier held the folded note in her hand. She didn't even open it right away. Her eyes were full, and her lips were shaking. She looked at the father and said softly, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," the father replied gently. "Just go. He's waiting for you." The cashier blinked away tears and nodded. She looked over her shoulder, then called out to the assistant manager standing nearby. She whispered something quickly, pointing at the register. The manager looked confused at first, then gave a quiet nod. She unpinned her name tag, handed it over, and grabbed her small bag from behind the counter dot as she passed the father again. On her way out, she paused for a second. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't know what this means to me." He just smiled and gave a small nod. "Go," he said. "Be with him." And then she was gone. The boy tugged at his dad's hand. "She looked happy," he said. "Yes," the dad replied. "Because now she has a little more time." They bought a small snack and headed home again. This time, the ride felt lighter. The boy talked more. He laughed at small things again. He didn't fully understand everything, but he understood that being kind mattered and that his dad had done something good. That night, the father sat in bed thinking. He couldn't stop wondering how the cashier's brother was doing. Was he awake? Was he still fighting? Had she made it in time to hold his hand, to talk to him? He didn't have her number. He didn't even know her name, but somehow he felt connected to her. Her pain had reached him, and her story reminded him how fragile life could be. He thought of the nights when he had been scared, when his own son had been sick with a high fever, and he'd spent hours beside the bed, not knowing if things would be okay. He knew that feeling, that helplessness, that silent prayer, that desperate hope that someone, somewhere would help carry just a little of the weight. The next few days went by. The father didn't return to the store. Not because he didn't want to, but because he wanted to give her space, time, and peace. If she wanted to share more, she would. Then one evening, 3 days later, he and his son walked into the store again. He didn't expect to see her, but there she was, behind the counter again, scanning items and smiling at the next customer. But something was different. She looked brighter. Her eyes didn't look so heavy anymore. She even laughed quietly with a little girl who dropped her candy. When the father stepped forward with a small basket, she looked up and her face lit up with recognition. "It's you," she said softly, stepping forward. "I've been hoping you'd come back." The father smiled. "I wasn't sure if I should." "No, I'm glad you did," she said. I wanted to tell you something." He leaned forward slightly. "That night, I made it just in time," she said, her voice already starting to shake. He opened his eyes for the first time. He was so weak, but he saw me. He held my hand. He smiled. She paused, her eyes full again. "If I had missed it, I don't know if I could have forgiven myself. But because of you, I was there." The father didn't know what to say. He felt a lump in his throat. His son looked up at him, sensing the emotion. "Is he better now?" the boy asked. The cashier smiled. "He's not out of danger, but he's fighting. And I'm with him every night now. I switched to a daytime shift thanks to some support I got. And some courage too." She handed over a small piece of paper. "This is my brother's name, and this is a photo. The father looked at the photo. A boy, maybe 10 years old, with a bandaged head and kind eyes, smiling faintly from a hospital bed. In his hand was a small drawing, a stick figure of a girl and a boy holding hands. "He drew that after I came," she said. "He said it's me and him." I asked him what made him smile after so many days. He said, "You came back. You didn't give up on me." The store around them seemed to pause. For a moment, it wasn't about customers or prices or products. It was about something much deeper: human connection, kindness, and timing. The father handed the photo back gently. "I'm glad you were there," he said. "No," she replied softly. "I'm glad you were." The father and his son walked out of the store, their hearts full. The air outside was cooler than before. The sky was slowly turning orange with the setting sun. The father looked down at his boy, who was holding a snack in one hand and the other hand tightly holding his dad's. "Dad," the boy said, "I'm happy she got to see her brother." "Me too, son," the father replied, with a small smile. Sometimes a small chance can change everything. They got into the car and drove home. The father was quiet, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few days. He hadn't done much, really. Just asked a question, just noticed someone, just gave her a little bit of help when she needed it most. But sometimes, that's all it takes. The next morning, as the father got ready for work, he checked his jacket pocket and found something he had forgotten about: a receipt from that day, the day he asked the question. He stared at it for a moment. The ink was fading, but the memory wasn't. He tucked it away in his wallet. That evening, after work, they stopped by the store again. This time not to buy groceries, but just to say hello. But as they entered, the manager was the one behind the counter. The young cashier wasn't there. The father asked politely, "She's not working today?" The manager smiled. "She doesn't work here anymore," he said. That caught the father by surprise. "She quit?" "Yes," the manager nodded. "But in a good way. She found something better. Some organization helped her get support. Her brother's recovery is going well, and she said she wanted to start over. New job, new place, new beginning." The father just stood there, silent for a moment. "She left a small envelope," the manager added. "Said to give it to you if you came back." The father took the envelope, surprised. He opened it carefully. Inside was a small handwritten note and a photo. The note read, "You changed my life in 1 minute. I'll never forget your kindness. My brother smiles again, and I found the strength to start new, all because someone took the time to care. Thank you. You reminded me that strangers can become blessings." There were no names, just a small heart drawn at the bottom. The photo was of her and her brother. He was no longer in a hospital bed. He was in a wheelchair, holding a balloon, smiling widely. She stood behind him, her arms around his shoulders, and her eyes sparkled in a way that didn't look tired anymore. They looked like a family finding light again. The father held the photo gently. His son stood beside him, reading the note out loud in his soft voice. When he finished, the boy looked up and whispered, "She's happy now." "Yes," the father said, his voice warm, "she is." That night, at home, the father sat on the couch and stared at the photo again. He thought about how things had started. A tired woman, staring at a clock. A single question. A simple act. And now a whole new story. He realized something. Kindness doesn't always take money. It doesn't always take big plans. Sometimes it's just noticing, just asking, "Are you okay?" and being ready to hear the real answer. He looked over at his son, who had fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket wrapped around him, a little smile on his lips. One day, his boy would grow up. He would go out into the world. And the father hoped that when that day came, his son would also stop and notice someone staring at a clock, that he would ask, that he would care, because that's how change begins, in small, quiet moments. The next morning, the father placed the photo on the fridge. held by a simple magnet. It sat next to his son's drawing of a dinosaur and a stick figure family. It was more than just a picture, it was a reminder that one quiet question had reached a hurting heart. That one small kindness had saved a moment that could never be repeated. And that even in a noisy, rushing world, people still needed each other. Days passed. Life continued. The father went to work. The boy went to school. But something inside their home had changed, a quiet lightness, a silent lesson that lingered in the air. The photo on the fridge, the one of the cashier and her brother, smiling together, stayed right where it was. Every time the father walked by it, he would glance at it and smile softly. It reminded him that a moment of care could do more than he ever imagined. He didn't know where the cashier had gone, or what town she moved to. He didn't know what job she had now, or how long her brother's recovery would take. But none of that mattered. He knew she had found peace. She had found time. And that was everything. One evening, as the father picked his son up from school, the boy held a folded paper in his hands. He climbed into the car and handed it over with a big smile. "We had to write about a real-life hero today," he said proudly. "I wrote about you." The father was surprised. "Me?" he asked with a little laugh. "Yeah," the boy nodded. "I told the class how you helped the lady at the store. How you noticed her when no one else did." The father opened the paper. The boy had written in his best handwriting, slightly crooked letters but full of heart. "My hero is my dad." One day, he saw a cashier who kept looking at the clock. He asked her why, and she said she had to go to the hospital. Her brother was very sick. "My dad helped her leave early so she could see him. She made it in time." Her brother smiled. "I think my dad is a hero because he made someone's sad day better. He is kind. I want to be like him." The father felt a tightness in his chest. He looked over at his son, who was smiling proudly from the back seat. "That was very kind of you to write," the father said softly, putting the paper in his bag. "But you know, heroes aren't always the people who do big things. Sometimes, they're just the people who pay attention." "I know," the boy said. "That's why I picked you." The father didn't say anything else. He just smiled. A long, quiet smile. That night, he placed the paper next to the photo on the fridge. One picture. One note. Two memories that told one story, a story about noticing the quiet, helping someone who didn't ask, and the power of showing up at the right time. Weeks later, the father and son were walking home from the park when they saw a little table on the sidewalk. A girl was selling handmade bracelets. She looked tired, a little nervous. People passed by without stopping. The boy looked up at his dad and whispered, "Can we help her too?" The father smiled, proud. "Let's go see what she's selling." They walked over, asked a few kind questions, and bought 2 bracelets they didn't need. The girl smiled wide, her first smile of the day. She waved as they walked away, and just like that, a new kindness was passed on. Because once you've seen what a small act can do, you never stop looking for the next one. At home, they added the bracelets to the growing collection on a hook near the door. They didn't match, they weren't fancy, but each one carried a memory, a moment, a story. Later that week, the father found an envelope in the mailbox, no return address, no stamp, just his name written in soft handwriting. Inside was another photo. This time, it was the cashier and her brother outside in the sun. He was standing with a cane, smiling bigger than before. She looked peaceful, healthy, full of life. Behind them was a new apartment door. A new start. The back, just a few words were written. "Thank you for giving me time." The father stood at the door for a moment, holding the photo. Then, he smiled and added it to the fridge. He looked around at his small kitchen, his happy son, the little drawings on the wall, and the warm light from the window. And he thought, sometimes we wait for the world to change. But maybe it starts with us, with one quiet question, one act of kindness. One person who chooses to notice. And in that moment, he knew he hadn't just helped someone, he had become someone.